My pleasure to be here with Rabbi Dr. David Moster, who studied at Yeshivat Shelavim for 2 years, went to Yeshiva University for a BA, an MA, an MS, and for smicha, for ordination, received a master's from NYU and his PhD from Bar Ilan, and today he is the director of the Institute of Biblical Culture. The biblicalculture.org. You can learn more about that. It's a live online community with classes taught by professors from both Jewish and Christian backgrounds. Thanks for taking time to talk.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you after a number of years.
Yes, together in YU grad school for a short time. Yeah. Why did you decide to start Biblical Culture?
So, I come from two backgrounds in my studies of the Bible, of Tanakh.
Yeah.
The first one is the traditional Jewish setting where the emphasis is on meaning and the beauty of the text and what they mean to me as a person. Then the second way I studied was really in the university, which was really a different type of question is, when was this text written and what is it saying and what were the people like who wrote it and things like that. Different types of questions, not mutually exclusive, but these were the two different ways I would study. And so when I went through my traditional studies and then my PhD, I always had both in different hands. And so what the biblicalculture.org really does is it allows people to have a space to explore not only the highest levels of scholarship, or what we try to be the highest levels, or the highest levels of meaning too. So we can read a text and find it beautiful, and we can also read a text and say, well, how did this text come about? And all of that. So that together, those two aspects in one kind of institute.
So what do you study specifically?
We study biblical culture, so that means we don't only study biblical texts, we study the people behind those texts. Yeah. So we're very interested in archaeology, we're interested in the ancient Near East, we just had a class on the Samaritan Torah, which is a Torah very similar to our Torah. Yeah. So it's all types of people relating to the text, and then it's also the texts themselves. We had a class on Tehillim, we're about to have on Psalms, we're about to have a class on Eov, on Job, and so these are the types of things that we study together.
And what's it like having Jews and Christians engage in this together?
Well, this was the big experiment.
Right.
Because I had never seen a space where lay people could express their own beliefs about a text from different religious backgrounds. Yeah. I'm not talking about Orthodox conservative. We're talking about Christian Jewish. Yeah. And it's worked out amazingly well. Much better than I ever thought it could. We have people learning things about their own way of study just from the fact that there's someone else, an other, in the room. So let me just give you an example. We were studying a class on a rabbinic text, the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael, an ancient midrash, the most rabbinic of rabbinic texts, and we had more Christians in the class than Jews. Okay? And we were studying the laws of the Passover sacrifice, which is very halachic, very legal, and is the most rabbinic thing you could be studying. And when our Christian students didn't raise their hand, they just spoke up and said, wait a minute, isn't the whole Passover sacrifice a metaphor, a foreshadowing of Jesus? And it was like this moment we all kind of looked at each other and said, well, what's happening in this room right now, in this space? And what was happening was that the Jews were realizing, wait, the way we interpret it is not necessarily the way others interpret it. And the Christians were realizing, hey, the way we interpret it is not the way the Jews are interpreting it. And it was really great because, so what we ended up saying was, well, this is what the Mechilta, this rabbinic text, was doing. It's not the Christian way, but everyone was able to learn their own assumptions that we brought to the text. It was a really great teacher's moment.
Right. So it's not Jewish-Christian dialogue.
No.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. I think this is
each person is going to have their own approach to the text, and they're going to walk away with their own.
Yes.
And that's why we stick to primary text.
Right.
Is when you stick to the base text, everyone can really take away what they want from the base text.
So, in addition to different ideological and religious commitments, how does having different relationships to authorship help and hurt kind of the collaborative intellectual journey? How does that play out?
You mean authorship of the
Tanakh,
specifically the Torah?
Text, yeah.
Like who wrote the Torah? Was it God Hashem or was it man or was it? So we have people in the same space at the same in the same room or room, learning together with very different viewpoints. We have some people who find religious meaning in the fact that they find human authors in all of these texts.
Mm-hmm.
So religious, deep spiritual meaning. We have other people who are studying the same text because for whatever reason they want to find no God whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are looking for God everywhere and so on and so forth. We have people studying, we have a student who just studies history. Mm-hmm. She's in other historical classes too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She studies the Bible historically. Yeah. And we have people who every day, in many ways, authorship matters. It doesn't matter. It's something to be avoided. It's something to be dealt with. We have so many different approaches, and I think a lot of that has to do with the diverse audience we have.
Interesting. So how does the program actually work?
So, well, what we have is actually online classes.
Okay.
It's live. We use a program called Zoom, which many of you may know.
Yeah.
So that means it's live and interactive.
Yeah.
We're able to say, hey, how were you last week? How was your week this past week?
Mm-hmm.
How's your kid doing? And so on.
Right.
It's very,
right.
it's us. We're talking. It's not a lecture.
Right.
And then we read together, we share the text together, and then all those classes are recorded. Mm-hmm. So then if somebody misses a class or years later they want to take a class, they have it there. Mm-hmm. But the main thing is for the people to join the community. Yeah. And so the community is all together. We're learning. Right. And then we also have a certificate program for our more advanced students or more serious students, which is 21 courses in 21 months and 2 projects so that they can really come out with a nice certificate.
Excellent. Now, how do we understand the continuity or a radical evolution between the early biblical texts and the values and laws of other cultures which the Bible emerged out of? Maybe you can give an example or two where there's a continuity and maybe an example or two of kind of a real evolution. The first 2 that come to mind for me was I remember being really startled when learning that actually we have a fair amount of data that circumcision preceded Abraham
in Egypt, right?
Right, or that monotheism preceded Abraham.
Akhenaten, right.
So is that something you can reflect on a little bit?
Yeah, these are things we study at the Institute too. Right. And this is a general ancient Near East question. When we're studying the cultures next to the Bible, how much is similar and how much is different?
Right.
And so I think the general answer is there's a lot of similarities. The laws, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth,
right.
All these things are there. The law of the slave being set free on a certain day.
Right.
All those.
And interesting on that front, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Code of Hammurabi says killing a slave is a monetary crime, and the Torah says it's a capital crime.
Right. Yeah. This was a big theory of a guy named Greenberg was pointing that out. It's very good. And so what happened is that there's so much similarity, and it's not just laws. It's the Song of Songs, Shir Shirim, is a love poetry. We have love poetry from Egypt, where it's between a man and a woman. The same thing. It's almost you could lift one from the other and put it back. And then we have Proverbs, Mishlei. A lot of the proverbs that we have in the book of Mishlei are actually very similar to ones in Egypt and things like that. So that's the general thing, Rav Shmuly. There is so much that is similar.
Right.
But the one difference that changes everything is that whereas in ancient Near East, power goes to kings, power goes to gods, justice is in the hand of the kings or the gods. In ancient Israel, in the Tanakh, it's all in God's hand. No one's above God. God is all. No one's great. God is great. There's no great poem about how powerful and mighty King David was. Right, but we have poems about other kings, Marduk, in the ancient Near East. But in the Bible, in Tanakh, it's really about it's all focused on God, which is a beautiful thing. And in my mind, that makes it more different than anything I've ever studied in the ancient Near East. Yeah, and I don't want to say what monotheism comes first or which monotheism is better. To me, that's not important. The Tanakh is the most fascinating book I've ever read, or books, and that's why we study it at biblicalculture.org. So.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and the fact that every king, I think, or virtually every king, has a prophet there to critique him.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They're not the end.
Right.
If not the voice of God, then a prophetic representation of God is there to play that role.
Yes.
So I think it's excellent. So how can people learn about what you're doing and plug in?
Well, they can sign up for a course. And we're at biblicalculture.org. Awesome. We have live courses coming out every single month. So each month is a new set of courses. Each course is only 4 weeks long, so it's not a huge commitment.
Yeah.
And if they want to study from previous courses, they can download those too.
Great. Rabbi Dr. David Moster, check it out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
me. Keep
me.
up the great work.